Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and Master Certified Life Coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today we're talking about following your passion for animal rescue and eventually realizing that this wasn't going to be your whole midlife story. Let's go. Welcome back to Women in the Middle with over 2 million downloads and counting. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your Master Certified Coach, Midlife Life Leadership Mentor, and Certified Zentangle Teacher. And I am so glad you're here for today's show because today we're talking about what it's like to be passionate about animals and animal welfare, decide to run an animal shelter, and then make the difficult decision to walk away from it in midlife. You're going to hear a powerful story about midlife decision-making and shifts and pivots. But just quick, before we dive in, I have a question for you. Are your priorities feeling murky these days? Getting clear about what you actually want makes everything easier, including the fun stuff. I have something that can help. It's called Get Unstuck Midlife Clarity Fast and Easy. It's a do-it-yourself masterclass that helps you get clear about your next chapter priorities without the spin, confusion, and overwhelm, and it's all in less than an hour. It's fast, it's easy, and it's available right now at an introductory price with instant access. If you've been going in circles trying to figure out what you want for your next chapter, this is the shortcut you've been waiting for. You're going to walk away with real clarity and a regret-proof power plan so you can stop overthinking and start moving. So head over to www.midliferoadmap.com to get started. Okay, now let me tell you more about my guest, Amy Castro. Amy is a professional speaker, communication expert, and proud U.S. Air Force veteran who served during the Gulf War. For more than 25 years, she's helped people communicate with confidence, set healthy boundaries, and speak up without backing down. But her most powerful reinventions didn't happen on stage. They happened in the middle of real life. In her 50s, Amy was living a comfortable suburban life and volunteering at a local animal shelter when a tragedy prompted her to start an animal rescue of her own. With the support of her family, she sold her home of 20 years and moved to a rundown property on a dead-end dirt road, transforming it into a working animal rescue ranch while still running her speaking and training business. In this episode, Amy shares her moving story about following her passion for animals, animal welfare, and the efforts to help pets find safety, stability, and love. Ultimately, she decided to say goodbye to animal rescue, and as you can imagine as an animal lover, this was an incredibly difficult decision. Amy shares what led to this midlife shift that was a critically important step in her midlife journey. Her story is one of resilience, reinvention, and the quiet power of knowing when it's time to turn the page. Please enjoy this incredibly authentic and powerful episode. Hi, Amy. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting. Something different for me.
Ooh, I love that. I love when my guests are excited. So your story is fascinating. I met you in a podcast group, and it's such a fun way to meet people and to find interesting stories. And when you started talking, my friend, I was interested. And I thought your story would be amazing for my listeners, especially because you made some very important and heavy decisions, big decisions in your life. And I'm fascinated with decision making and transition. And I thought, you got to tell your story. You just got to tell your story. So let's start with having you tell us a little bit about what was going on for you in your 40s and 50s.
Well, I am a reluctant speaker. I'm a professional speaker, communication expert by trade, and always had terrible public speaking anxiety, believe it or not. But I got over that. That's a whole nother story. But as I got into my 40s and 50s, my career was going well as far as the communication business goes, and, just kind of coasting in life, but not necessarily feeling, and as a matter of fact, less and less over time, feeling like my professional life for sure was very satisfying. And then our local town moved its animal control facility from the other side of town to literally across the street from my neighborhood. And so I am a longtime animal lover, and I thought, okay, now is my opportunity to get involved in helping animals, like I always thought I would, volunteering at a shelter and things like that. And so that was a big shift, and it turned from occasional volunteering to, and once you get into something like that, you get such a different perspective on what animal rescue, animal sheltering is really like. And once you get in, it's hard to step back. You just dive in deeper and deeper. And so it really started kind of taking over my time, my energy, and, really feeding a need for a passion that I had.
Wow. I'm my head's exploding because I'm right now connecting with every YouTube video and Instagram video and Facebook video I have scrolled and stopped on about animal rescue. What are some of the things that surprised you as you started to move in that direction?
Well, obviously all communities are different, and it depends on, the organization that you're involved in. But a couple of things. Number one, that people can have such extreme views about their pets. There are people who believe and feel and treat their pets like they are their human family members and would do anything. And then there are people on the opposite end of the extreme that have no qualms with throwing their pet in a lake they can't get out of because they don't want it anymore. And so that was a huge challenge for me, being faced by that. And then also the burnout that the people who work in animal rescue and sheltering, they probably started off, many of them, as very compassionate people towards animals, and you just get compassion fatigue. And that was a bit of a shock until it started happening to me. It's you never think that you could be like, and but you do, because it just becomes overwhelming.
Wow, like one story's just worse than the next.
Exactly. Yeah, just when you think you've seen it all, people just will surprise you with how much worse they can possibly get. But nobody would stay in rescue if it was all doom and gloom. Of course, it's the wins that you get that make it worthwhile. But it absolutely takes its toll on everybody that's involved in the process, I think.
Wow. And that totally makes sense. I've never worked in animal rescue. I do watch the videos. I do make donations, and I cry a lot when I'm watching those videos. And that's the thought that goes right to my mind, is how can people treat their pets like that? How can they treat animals like that? It is shocking. And not everybody does that. There are the extremes. Now, I have never dressed my dogs up, but I know that some people get a lot of enjoyment from that. I did have to put booties on him once because we were trying to get him in a boat, and we didn't want his claws, Nico the Noof, we didn't want Nico's claws to go through the seats. But that's as close as I've gotten, or maybe a bandana. But I know that people get so many people get so much enjoyment out of sharing their life with animals. Okay, then I know in your show notes you talked about 2020 and the COVID pandemic, and you had some tragedy during that time. Do you want to share what happened?
Sure. Well, so the progression from volunteering at the shelter and realizing that I was limited in what I could do. Actually, there was a kind of a pre-tragedy that prompted me to start a nonprofit animal rescue. So when in 2017, I was volunteering. I was the head volunteer at the animal shelter, and I got a call from one of my volunteers, and she's actually, it was a text, I'm sorry, saying that Emma had passed away. And she and her daughter had volunteered at the shelter with us, taking care of little kittens and things like that. And I was so shocked that my brain couldn't remember her daughter's name because it couldn't possibly be Emma. But it turns out it was, that Emma had passed away at 14 years old. And her middle name was Starlight. And so right then, like, you talk about a change and something just kind of hitting you with a vision. Right then, I knew I was going to start an animal rescue. I was going to name it Starlight Outreach and Rescue. And that kind of led to just diving further into animal rescue. I ended up selling my suburban home, moving to a 7-acre, which is where I'm sitting right now, a 7-acre ranch. It's not really a ranch by Texas standards, but by Amy Castro standards, it's a ranch. And just blowing up the rescue work on my own and with volunteers, obviously. So my family was all in on that going forward. And then 2020 and COVID, and we did not think it was going to impact us like it did. But in November of 2020, my husband got COVID. We gave it to all of us, and he ended up passing away from it. And that was not something that any of us anticipated. But the rescue work still had to go on. And that's just one of the things that it's amazing, the things that you can be, that you can push through when you have a mission and a focus. And I mean, my daughter and I were both recuperating, sitting in bed together in my big king bed and running a fundraiser online because it had to go on. I mean, I couldn't just say no. Animals still needed to be fed, spayed, neutered, etc. So it, but it does change your perspective on everything that you do, for sure.
Do you think that your passion project helped you move forward?
I think it definitely did, because it does. Your dog is not going to not need to go out just because you're grieving. It's and the chickens are going to need to be fed, and the donkeys need to be brought in, and the 40 cats in the cat building need to be scooped and cared for. So it really gives you something to focus on so that you're not focusing on things. I don't think I've ever been somebody to dwell on things that are in the past or out of my control. I think that, and sometimes I'll even have a conversation in my head to talk myself out of going in a direction that is going to be not productive for me. I believe everybody needs to feel their feelings, and you do need to grieve. I'm not saying don't grieve, but at the same time, wallowing in it for me is not an option. I have to look at moving forward. It's not even moving on, it's moving forward, because what other option do you have?
Well, the option is to not get out of bed. I mean, I had a lot of death in my family growing up. And my mom used to always say that the kids, there were 5 of us, gave her, reason to get up that day. So I see what you're saying. You're not minimizing grief or the importance of grief. You can move on with grief.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. But it was very important to you to put one foot in front of the other, and having the animals who needed to get fed and go off and go out made it obvious that you wanted to do that, and it helped you.
Definitely. And I think it also, when you have a major life event, especially something that's a tragedy, it puts other things in perspective. So it definitely allowed me to make harder decisions, because I realized what was truly important versus what might have been on a superficial level important. And it really kind of enhanced my ability to say no to things. I think I was doing pretty well before that. That was a lesson. It took me a long time to learn it. But, being able to say no when something doesn't serve me or the organization or the greater good, despite the fact that it might make you happy, is I think, an important skill that I learned. But it was just fine-tuned even further after that, because, when you've got a limited time on this earth, you don't want to waste it doing things that are not serving something.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. That beginning of COVID was so crazy. It was so scary and still so surprising that something like that could kill you. And then it became less surprising, and then it happened to you. I mean, it's just so, I don't know how we're going to explain the COVID experience years from now, It was intense and scary and tragic.
Yes. Yeah. Especially because now, it's not like people aren't still getting it here and there, but it's so shocking to me how it can go from such an extreme. I mean, and the fact that in our family, there's 3 of us, we referred to ourselves as the triad, because it's us. And, the healthiest, most active person in the household was the one that ended up dying. And at one point, my daughter, who is obviously significantly younger than me and healthier, she and my husband were both in the hospital at the same time on two different floors.
Oh my.
And it was it was surreal. It was definitely surreal.
I think that's a great word for the experience. I mean, I wasn't in your experience, but the overall
Sure.
experience. My husband worked in healthcare, and I
Oh,
wanted him, to get changed and go straight to the laundry room, put all your clothes in the washing machine, and then you can, get in your pajamas or something. Like I remember wiping down groceries. Like
mm-hmm.
it was just what was going on and how long it went on was real. It was surreal. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, well, you had a passion and you had a vision. So what
Mm-hmm.
happened next?
Well, we proceeded head down and, doing the rescue stuff, running the ranch, picking up the responsibilities that normally would have, the things that nobody really wants to do that I would have normally said, honey, can you please do this? Kind of picking up those responsibilities and doing those ourselves. And if you'd have asked me in 2021, what's your life going to be like when you quote unquote retire, or where do you think you're going to die? I would have told you I would have been here at this little rescue ranch doing the rescue until I couldn't do it anymore. And, even, in 2021, actually a year to the day that my husband passed away, I got diagnosed with cancer, dealt with that, kept doing the rescue, just kept going, kept going.
Oh,
And then, yeah, it was crazy. I mean, the things that we plowed through. But 2024, we were hit by Hurricane Beryl. And Texas, we're used to hurricanes. It's not anything new and different. But I think it kind of hit us on the precipice of a breaking point. And as we were out on the property trying to batten down hatches and wondering if this building full of kittens was going to blow away kind of thing, I found myself sitting at the edge of my swimming pool in the hurricane with my feet in the pool, crying about the state of my life. And I just said, when? One of my favorite movies, I used to show this movie when I was teaching college communication classes. It's called Regarding Henry, and it's got Harrison Ford in it. And he has a traumatic brain injury, et cetera, and tries to go back to work. And there was a scene that I'm always reminded of where his assistant has to tell him, as she's pouring coffee for him, you need to say when. And later on in the movie, he walks out to her and he basically said, I said when. And it's like that line just sticks with me so much. And I was sitting on the end of the pool and on the edge of the pool, and I realized when. I'm done. And right then and there, I made the decision to not only get out of the rescue business as it stood at the time, but to sell this property and move on and do something else. Not sure what that was going to be, but I was done.
Wow. So what do you think would have happened if the hurricane didn't hit?
I think, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I would like to think, because as soon as I made the decision, I felt so different, and I have felt so different moving forward, even though the process of transitioning rescue responsibilities and putting my house on the market and rehoming animals that I thought might stay here forever, and the sort of the guilt of giving up on rescue, like I don't care about animals anymore, which is absolutely not true. But I like to think that something would have hit me upside the head and said, wake up, because it was not a healthy, and it's like this for a lot of rescue people. It is not a healthy lifestyle when you are all in and basically not doing anything to care for yourself financially, physically, emotionally, and all about the animals, because the tide of animals is never ending. There's never going to be a time where there's not a need, and you can just basically get eaten alive by this lifestyle, if you can call it that. And so I like to think that something would have hit me upside the head and I would have stopped or scaled back or something, but I'm not sure when, and I'm not sure what the toll would have been by the time something else hit me in the head. So I'm actually quite grateful that it hit when it did.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember thinking about this when I was stuck for 5 years. So my stuck story, career-wise, midlife-wise, happened the year I turned 50. And I was from 45 to 50, I was in this stuck state where I just wasn't able to make decisions or see anything clearly or understand what I wanted. And it was such a weird phase. And then I got laid off.
Mm,
The actual year I turned 50, my first kid went to university that year. It was kind of beautiful timing. It was like right on schedule. And then that freed me up to say yes to a few things and to discover coaching
mm,
and online business and the opportunity to become an entrepreneur. Now, I always had an opportunity to become an entrepreneur, and I dabbled in some entrepreneurial things over the years. But I also wonder what would have happened if I didn't get laid off. The layoff
mhm.
gave me the gift I couldn't give myself, much like the hurricane. It
Yeah.
it gave you the insight, the gift of insight and clarity. I've had clients talk about it as a coconut bonk on the head, like
Hmm.
bonk the way you just kind of described it. And, when people talk about burnout, you always wonder, when did the burnout start? So you obviously had some of these thoughts, but didn't
Yeah.
appreciate them or recognize them, or your awareness wasn't enough of the persistence of the thought. But it's going on for usually a while before we recognize it, before it gets that bad.
Definitely. And it's so interesting that you say that because even going back to, I mean, there's been so many of those coconuts on the head. And your story reminds me, how I started my communication training business was not because that's what I chose to do. I always kind of, I'm not a huge risk taker. I will do something if I am fairly convinced that I have the skill, the will, the tools to be successful at it. I'm not a jump off the cliff without a parachute kind of person.
Hmm.
And the only reason I started my communication training business, which has been very successful for me, is because I had been teaching community college and was applying for a full time, nice, safe job there. And literally 3/4 of the way through the interview process where I was going to get hired full time, my boss had a massive heart attack and passed away. And that left a gap in the
In the
department.
interview?
No, I'm sorry. No, no, no,
Oh
I'm
my
sorry. But
God.
as the interview process was going and I was kind of like a shoe-in, he said, for this job, he passed away and he did it was a speech drama department. So he did a lot of the drama classes. Well, now that he was gone, that speech position I was applying for was a speech drama position, and I was tossed to the curb because
Wow.
I had no drama background. And I thought my world had come to an end. Had put all my eggs in that basket. That was going to be my life. I was going to do that for 20 years. Looking back on it now, I thought, oh, how could I have thought I wanted to do that for 20 years? But it is interesting. It's sometimes we do need the coconut. Sometimes we need the hurricane, the death, something to push us. And it's unfortunate that we wait that long. But I think once you get down a path, you're afraid to say when. And I think you're afraid to be perceived as a quitter. I know for the rescue, I guess, like I mentioned, it's there is a feeling of guilt that I am giving up on my volunteers because now they won't have an organization to volunteer with. How many animals will not be helped because I'm not here to do that? And you can convince yourself to stay in a pretty terrible situation for you by having that type of thinking. And at some point you have to say, I can't be responsible for all of that.
Right. And this is a real common problem for midlife women. It comes up all the time in my community and with my clients. And under all of it is this struggle, the challenge, and for some, an inability to put themselves first, to
Mm,
recognize their own desires, to recognize that they deserve to allow themselves to be happy or content or have more peace or whatever it is. But the way we think about it is, it's so common to feel that it's indulgent or it's over the top. And I remember one of the thoughts I had, because I had a secure job before my layoff, and it was a great job. It was great for a long time, for decades.
mm-hmm.
um, but I had this thought, even though I'd wanted to be an entrepreneur since I was like for a very long time, most of my life, I tried The first time was when I was 12. Like I always was doing something on the side. But I had this thought that I have the dental benefits for the family.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm just like, who am I? I can't be certain that I'm going to make more money or I'm going to, or even what I'm going to do, or even what I want to do. I was so disconnected with my feelings,
Mm-hmm.
amazingly disconnected, even with the psychology background, even with working in a people-oriented place for as long as I did. It didn't matter. Like, that's not the way we're brought up.
That's right.
People
Well,
our age are brought up to put others first and to lean into those roles. And it feels very selfish and indulgent to allow yourself to connect with those ideas and thoughts of desire, what you really want. And the other thing is, at this point in our lives, things change. So now that I'm 60, my horizon of what I want, when I'm looking out, what do I want? I'm certainly not making a decision about what I want to do 20 years, but we have the ability now to say, this is what I'm going to do for now. And that next best step is going to lead me to the next best step. But
right.
back in the day, when we started to make plans 20, 30 years ago, we did want to find that job that and think about, oh, I'm going to be there for 20, 30 years. I'm going to have a pension and, wrap things up in a bow, Tiffany bow, please. Right.
Yeah.
So we're really part of it is that being midlife and having to make decisions like this and to leave something that might be challenging, but it didn't have a natural date of closure takes courage
Mm-hmm.
because it is a decision that you have to make. And it's the decision to end something. One of the interviews I did, and I'll put this in the show notes, I interviewed somebody I knew who had started a school. She was one of the 5 co-founders of a school. And then I knew her long enough to watch her make the decision to retire her position and talk to her then too. So I got to talk to her about
Oh, wow.
creating something and her personal decision to walk away from something that was in very good shape. It was fascinating. And really, that's what you're doing.
I think it's a matter of, you feel like you've put so much time and energy into something that it's hard to just cut it off and stop. And then now what? That's kind of my question now is now what? I know my perspective has changed completely. I know I feel more peace, less anxiety, less stress, knowing that I'm leaving, even though the rescue is still going on, it's still running. I have not sold my house yet, but I have a vision of what the next step could be, or actually what it's not going to be. I don't have a clear vision of what the next step is going to be because I don't even know where I'm going to go or what exactly I'm going to do. Am I going to dive back into my speaking business and try to grow that a little bit for the next few years? Because I'm 59. I don't want to do it forever, although I could do it for a lot longer than than now. But I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going to land. I bought an RV and
Ooh.
it's sitting outside. And the only real reason I bought the RV is not because I necessarily intended to just like travel and figure out where I was going to land, but because at the time I had 7 animals that I was going to have to move with me. I know I want to go back to the East Coast from Texas, but I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to end up. So once this house sells, it's like, okay, now what? We're going to get in the RV and we're going to head east, and then we're
Ooh,
going to
you are not
see
the
where we
first
go.
person. You are not the first person I've spoken to who bought an RV because of animals. It gives you the ultimate flexibility and security to do that. But you know what's interesting too is we think about closure and ending things, and one way to think about things that I was taught that I find so useful is that this chapter is complete. And using the word complete is so respectful. It doesn't feel like your value and your passion to support animals needs to end. It just needs to end the way you were doing it during this chapter. You can still make donations. You can still foster cats. You can do whatever you want to do, but you don't need to be in charge of a massive operation like this. And I think it's amazing that you figured out how to take the next best step. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to know the next best step.
That's good. That's such a good point, and I love that. That it's complete. It's and it's your own definition of complete. I don't care what other people's definition is. As a matter of fact, anybody that would like to judge my decision, I can gladly turn the rescue over to you and you can run it. And suddenly, it was kind of like crickets when I did make that offer to anybody that wanted to step in and keep it going. And a couple of people thought that they wanted to keep it going. So it's like, okay. And we've been doing that. I mean, it was supposed to be shut down as of December of last year. And now here we are still going because they wanted to give it a whirl and realized that they don't want to live that lifestyle 24/7 either. So it's okay. It's okay to move on. And I feel like, I will never lose my passion for animals. As a matter of fact, I feel like I have regained a passion for animals because you become kind of overwhelmed and numb to them. My own personal dogs, as an example, they've become a herd. Even, it's like everybody in, everybody out. Here's your food. Throw it down. I don't get to spend quality time with them because I don't have time to spend quality time with them. And now that all of the other animals are gone, I can actually enjoy the unique quirks of my bulldog versus my chihuahua. And I'm kind of looking forward to being able to enjoy regular things instead of going from crisis to emergency to whatever it might be in rescue. So it's definitely something to look forward to.
Well, it sounds like you've really done such amazing work on yourself to be able to allow this new phase. And one of the common regrets that people have is that they don't allow themselves to be happy. And I think you were in that without really knowing, because it felt, of course you're happy. You're doing your life's work. You're working on your passion project. You're all in. But the lifestyle piece was missing.
Yes.
True happiness includes your lifestyle.
Yes. And I think, the idea, especially for women, of, self-sacrifice. I wasn't sacrificing for my kiddos. My kiddo is 32 years old. So that ship has sailed, but sacrificing everything for animals who, can't care for themselves. And you feel like you're doing a good thing and that should be enough to sustain you until you realize it doesn't. It doesn't sustain you, and it doesn't give you the energy to do the right things, I think. And I will continue to help animals. I have a pet podcast, and I'm hoping to basically put that time and energy into the podcast so that I can help people on a much bigger scale to avoid some of the issues that we have with unwanted and abandoned animals. And so I feel like I'm still contributing toward the welfare of animals and feeding that passion without it taking over my entire life and my house.
What's the name of the podcast?
It is the Pet Parent Hotline. And so it's going to be your lifeline to living with pets without pulling out your hair. That's not really my tagline, but
it's a good one.
Yeah, but that is my hope, is that people will learn from my experiences with having lots of pets and from the experts that we interview on the show how to have that quality of life and not let pets take over or dominate. It's amazing to me, the people that come to the rescue, as an example, and they're at the end of their rope with pets and the things that they have put up with, with the pet behavior that they have not been able to resolve. And it's like, how did you live like that for that long? And so I'm hoping to help other people avoid that pain by providing some solutions to common pet issues.
Yeah. And it's not just the actual solutions, but it's also your mindset. Like if you have a mindset that we are a team and we are going to figure this out together. And I know there's a solution, like you're open to the possibility of the issue being managed. That's very different than the way you can get when you're so frustrated. It's hard. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of money sometimes to manage stuff, and it can be very frustrating. So I just know that mindset is so important.
Definitely.
With all relationships.
Yeah, exactly. It's it all takes work, and and communication. That's what keeps me in business, is people who are not effectively communicating. But communication is the key to all of it as well. Communicating with your family members about getting help, communicating with your pet, communicating with your vet. All of those things come into play.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you mentioned was that as soon as you made a decision, you felt different. There's such freedom in making a decision. Even if you end up tweaking the decision, Making a decision moves you forward. Staying confused and stuck and not making a decision keeps you stuck. And you
Yes.
made that decision. So if you need to tweak well, you don't have all the answers.
No, I do
Got the
not.
RV, but you don't know what's going to happen next. So exciting. So what's the advice you would give to some of our listeners who are in a situation like this with their pet, with a really frustrating situation?
I would say, be very clear in asking for help. I think, and if you don't get the right help, keep looking, because there is very likely a solution out there. At the same time, I think the idea of when to say when, there are certain things with pet, a pet that's having a problem, going potty in the house, that's one issue. And there probably is a solution for that. At the same time, sometimes the solution's not a solution that you were expecting. It might be more of a workaround based on your pet's age or stage in life or physical condition. At the other end of the spectrum, as much as I would never say a person should give, in rescue, people are very judgy sometimes about a person that's giving up a pet or euthanizing a pet. I mean, I don't mean to get dark, but, there are times where you get to a point where you do need to say when with a pet because it is either unsafe or everybody's quality of life is being negatively impacted. And, even the pets, sometimes we try to do the right thing by pets by keeping them, either with us in our family as opposed to finding a different family for them or keeping them alive when maybe that's not the best thing for them. And so, being able to get the support to make those decisions in the best interest of everybody, not just one side or the other.
Okay. And then the other question I have for you, that's great advice. The other question is for somebody who is not sure that they want to stay status quo and they feel that a change is coming, but they're not ready to really hear what they're thinking. So how do you access that knowing, that sense that something has to change, like really dig into it?
I mean, I can only speak for myself and my experience, but I am a planner. Not to the point that I'm going to ruin your vacation or anything by over planning it, but I do like to have a plan, and so, even when my husband was on a ventilator, just as an example, as much as I did not want to think about the fact that he could die and they weren't sure what was going to happen, and maybe this is morbid, but I already had started a spreadsheet of things that would need to be taken care of and where are we financially and, what is going to happen. And so in the same thing when I decided like, okay, we're going to put the house on the market and move. I mean, I started I still have the document and I still work on it. I have this spreadsheet and it's like where, there's a page for where could I possibly move and what does it cost to live there and what am I going to do with the pets and how am I going to get them adopted? And so to me, and I'm still not taking one step to actually do any of those things, but I think by kind of I call it playing the what if game. What if I did that? What would need to happen in order to get from point A to point B? If I want to see myself sitting on 3 acres in a little Cape-style house in Connecticut by 2026, what are the things that might need to happen between now and then? And, it helps you it really gets you a feel for whether that direction feels right or not, or where are the pitfalls that you might possibly need to investigate a little bit further. And I know, like for the move, just as an example, the more I started doing the research, the more it felt like the right idea. And the more you would not believe, and I'm not a divine intervention kind of believer per se, but once I made that decision sitting at the edge of the pool, the things that happened that kind of were like signs that this is the right thing and how easy some of the things, like, just as an example, trying to rehome donkeys in Texas is not easy because there's a lot of donkeys in Texas. And I thought and that was one of the things that was keeping me here is I was never going to be able to find a proper home for those donkeys. And so I now have to stay here until they die. And that was my thinking. Mm-hmm. And I found homes. I'm not saying it was super easy and that it happened overnight, but the ease and the quality of the people that I found to take those donkeys were better people than myself. I mean, that's a sign that I found this great place for this donkey, or that somebody wanted my chickens. It's, the things that occurred were just reinforced the decision pretty much every step of the way.
Oh, Amy, I love those stories. Thank you so much for sharing that. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, it depends on which Amy you want to get a hold of. So I've got my, amycastro.com is my speaker communication, communication coaching website. And then the podcast, if you wanted to follow the podcast or get in touch with me as the podcast person, it's the petparenthotline.com. Or you can actually do petparenthotline.com. Both of those work.
Amazing. Amy, thank you so much. We're so excited. I'm sure I'm speaking for the listeners. We all are so excited for the big decisions you made, your passion. I know you're still going to be helping animals in some way and enjoying your pets in a different way than you have lately. You're going to be a badass out there on the road with your RV. You're going to figure it all out. It was so great getting to know you and hearing your story. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for listening to my story. I appreciate it. I mean, it reinvigorates me. Now I'm even more excited.
Oh, my gosh. Well, it's a great story, and you're doing very important work, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right, my friend, following your passion can be a challenging road to take. It is pretty easy to imagine how you could experience burnout. I don't think I'll ever forget Amy's description of realizing that she needed to give herself permission to say when. Because even the most meaningful mission can become too much, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go and move on. Amy's story was so powerful, and it reminded me so much of how difficult decisions like this can be. This week, I want to invite you to notice how you are making decisions. Are you also struggling to give yourself permission to trust your gut, be kind to yourself, recognize your burnout, or make a big change? This can be a tricky thing in midlife. If today's episode stirred something up and you want to explore it further, maybe you're struggling with a big decision right now and you want help seeing it clearly. That's exactly what the next chapter direction session is for. It's a private 50-minute conversation where we're going to take a real look at what's going on in your life, what you may not be seeing, and what needs to change so you can move forward with clarity and intention. You can book yours at www.talktosusie.com. And if you'd like to do some of this work on your own first, the Get Unstuck Midlife Clarity Fast and Easy Masterclass is waiting for you at www.midliferoadmap.com. In less than an hour, you're going to walk away with a real plan. Thanks so much for being here today. It genuinely means a lot that you spend your time with me. For show notes and links, head to www.susierosenstein.com and look for episode 465. And don't forget to check out the Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs. It's my other show, and it's all about the reality of running a business as a midlife woman. It's everywhere you listen to podcasts. Being the queen of your brain domain is still the best way to be. I'll talk to you next week.